officer, co-author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win, Dichotomy of Leadership, host of the top-rated Jocko podcast, and co-founder of Echelon Front, where he serves as Chief Executive Officer, Leadership Instructor, Speaker, and Strategic Advisor. Jocko spent 20 years in the SEAL teams, starting as an enlisted SEAL and rising through the ranks to become a SEAL officer. As commander of the SEAL Team 3's Task Unit Bruiser during the Battle of Ramadi, he orchestrated SEAL operations that helped the Ready First Brigade of the U.S. Army's 1st Armored Division bring stability to the violent, war-torn city. Task Unit Bruiser became the most highly decorated Special Operations Unit of the Iraq War. Jocko returned from Iraq to serve as officer in charge of training for all West Coast SEAL teams. There, he spearheaded the development of leadership training and personally instructed and mentored the next generation of SEAL leaders who have continued to perform with great success on the battlefield. Jocko is the recipient of the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and numerous other personal and unit awards. Upon retiring from the Navy, Jocko co-founded Echelon Front, a premier leadership consulting company, where he teaches the leadership principles he learned on the battlefield to help others lead and win. Jocko also authored the Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, a New York Times bestseller, and the best-selling Way of the Warrior Kid Children's Book series. Ladies and gentlemen, stand to your feet, raise the roof, and make some noise for Jocko!
Appreciate it. I apologize for that 42-minute bio you just heard about me. All right. I'm going to talk to you today. I'm going to talk to you about leadership. I'm going to talk to you about combat leadership. And I think that you're going to see that the lessons that we learned on the battlefield are lessons that you can take and you can apply them not only to your business, but to your life as well. So, I spent my adult life in the SEAL teams. And a lot of times when people think about the SEAL teams, what they think of is they think of the training that you see on TV. They put on TV all the time with guys carrying boats on their heads and carrying telephone poles around. The training where you see all those people quit. In fact, most people quit. About 80% of people quit. Well, I didn't quit. I made it through this training. And when I got done with the training, I went to a place called SEAL Team 1 in San Diego, California. Beautiful place to be stationed. And when I got there, I had just missed the first Gulf War, which honestly kind of broke my heart, because my whole life I wanted to be some kind of commando and fight. And this big war happened, and I missed the whole thing. And so what do you do when you're at a SEAL team and there's no war going on? Well, what you do is you train, and then you train some more, and then you train some more. It's train. I don't want to make the training sound that bad, because the training that we're doing is actually shooting machine guns and blowing things up and jumping out of airplanes. It's basically awesome. But we're still not going and actually fighting. And as I worked at SEAL Team 1, we would deploy overseas, but all we would do is train other foreign nationals on how to do this stuff. And I did move up through the ranks, eventually got selected for a commissioning program, which meant I was going to become an officer and become a leader inside the SEAL teams. And when that happened, I went from SEAL Team 1, which is in San Diego, out to SEAL Team 2, which is in Virginia Beach. And when I got out to SEAL Team 2, Now I'm an assistant platoon commander. This is where I did my first real missions as a SEAL. And what we were doing is there were sanctions against Iraq at the time. What that meant was people were smuggling stuff in and out of Iraq, mostly over the waterways. Somebody had to stop those smugglers, and that someone was us. And so sometimes we would take down big vessels like you see on the bottom left there, big oil tankers, and we'd fast rope onto those things in the middle of the night from helicopters. We'd storm the bridge, we'd get control of the vessel, we'd turn it over to the authorities. There'd be millions of dollars worth of oil on those vessels, and that would feel pretty good. But most of the time, we were taking down much smaller little vessels like you see on the bottom right there. And these are a lot smaller. They're so small, in fact, that we didn't use helicopters. We just used our own little boats, and we'd pull alongside them, and we'd hook ladders onto them, and we'd climb aboard, and we'd storm the bridge, and we'd get control of those vessels, and then we'd search to see what they were smuggling. And 99% of the time, what they were smuggling was actually dates. I don't know if you know what dates are, but they're pretty much like a giant raisin. Yeah. So that was our big mission. It was to go out there and capture giant raisins. Not exactly what I joined the SEAL teams to do. But you know what? That was our mission. So we did it to the best of our ability. I got done with a couple deployments out there at SEAL Team 2. Once I got done with that, in order to be an officer in the military, you have to go to college. I hadn't been to college yet. So the Navy sent me back to San Diego, where my entire job was just go to college. That's all I had to do, was go to college. Didn't have to put my uniform on. All I had to do was go to my classes and get good grades. Gave me a lot of free time. I ended up buying a house down by the water. I was married, having kids, spending time with my family, surfing. And really what I was doing was just enjoying everything that San Diego and everything that California, and really just enjoying everything that America had to offer. And it was an awesome time. And then this happened. So September 11th comes, our country's attacked, there's fear, and there's terror, and there's uncertainty throughout the country. Except for me and my friends and those of us that were in the military, we were now absolutely certain of one thing. And that is we knew we were going to war. And the war kicked off in Afghanistan. Very quickly, the focus shifted over to Iraq. I got back to a SEAL team. Once I was back in a SEAL team, I got put into charge of a SEAL platoon. We watched on TV as the war kicked off in Iraq, the shock and awe of the air war, and then the ground troops pushed very quickly up into Baghdad, saw the regime get toppled. It looked like this war was going to be over very quickly. Luckily for me, I got to go on deployment. I deployed with my SEAL platoon into Baghdad in the fall of 2003. And when we got there, the mission that we were doing was something that we call direct action or capture kill. And what that means is we would find the location of a bad guy through various intelligence sources. We would figure out where that bad guy was. Once we knew where that bad guy was, we would load up our vehicles in the middle of the night. We'd drive to the location of that bad guy. We'd usually stop our vehicles a couple blocks away because they got big diesel engines, they make a bunch of noise. We didn't want the enemy to know that we were coming, so we'd stop the vehicles, we'd dismount the vehicles, we'd walk up to the target building. Just about every building in Iraq has like a 6 to 8 foot wall around it, so we made little ladders with 2x4s, and we'd put those ladders up against the wall, we'd climb over into those compounds, we'd put a big giant explosive breaching charge on the door, and then we'd blast that door open. We'd enter the building, we'd grab the bad guy we were looking for, we'd bring him back to our base, we would interrogate him, we would find out where his friends were, and then we'd go get his friends. And it was awesome. Honestly, it's what I wanted to do my whole life. It's what our platoon had trained to do. It was what we were prepared to do. The enemy at this time was just a bunch of thugs and hoodlums and criminals running around causing problems. We had a huge tactical advantage over them. We got in 4 or 5 firefights. I had one guy get wounded, but it wasn't real bad. So we felt great. We high-fived after these missions, and we high-fived after this deployment. And when we came home from this deployment, we thought the war was going to be over quick. But we were wrong. We got back to America in 2004. We started to hear a new word being used to describe what was happening in Iraq. And this new word was insurgency. And what this meant was that these thugs and former criminals that had been running around causing problems, but were totally disorganized, now they were becoming organized. Now they were being financed. And most important, now they were being led. And these insurgents started to get more and more aggressive. And nowhere was this more obvious than a place in western Iraq, the capital of Al-Anbar province. Al-Anbar province is the biggest province in Iraq, and the capital city is a place called Ramadi. And this place was a complete and utter war zone. And if you remember this time frame, this is now 2005, 2006, if you remember watching the news during that time, just about every night you'd hear on the news that there was 3 Marines killed in Al-Anbar province, or 3 soldiers killed in Al-Anbar province. And the vast majority of those casualties took place in this capital city of Ramadi. And also, if you remember at this time, popular opinion in America was turning against the war. And on top of that, we had our own government officials here in America saying that this was a quagmire and this was another Vietnam and there was no way we could win. And in addition to that, there was a military intelligence report which was eventually leaked to the press, which painted a very grim picture of what was going on in Ramadi. I got a quote up there. It says, "The social and political situation has deteriorated to a point that U.S. and Iraqi troops are no longer capable of militarily defeating the insurgency in Al-Anbar." And this report went on to say that Ramadi and Anbar province were all but lost. And with that, when I come home from my first deployment to Iraq, where I was in charge of 1 SEAL platoon, when I got home, I took over 2 SEAL platoons. 2 SEAL platoons combined together is called a task unit. And our task unit was called Task Unit Bruiser. And we did a training cycle to prepare for operations in Iraq. And about 2 weeks before our scheduled deployment, we found out that we were deploying into the belly of the beast, into the city of Ramadi. Now, when we got to Ramadi, there was already soldiers and Marines doing an outstanding job taking the fight to the enemy. And that's why I have the word "we" written up there. Because when I stand up here and I say we did this, and we did that, and we did something else, I want to make it crystal clear that I'm absolutely not just talking about me and my 40 SEALs. I'm talking about this incredible team of soldiers and airmen and Marines. And they did the bulk of the heavy fighting. They did the bulk of the heavy lifting, and we were humbled and honored to be able to support them. They also had those big machines right there called tanks. And if you don't know anything about them, that right there, that tank weighs 68 tons. Just a massive metal machine of total destruction. And also what I think is one of the most beautiful things that mankind has ever invented. And the reason I think that is because when my SEALs were under the threat of being overrun in the city, it was these tanks and it was the soldiers and Marines that bravely drove these tanks that would come to rescue my guys over and over and over again. Yeah. Woo. So we get there, we get on the ground, and there's intense fighting. It's the cliche that you always hear. Neighborhood to neighborhood, street to street, house to house. A very determined enemy, an enemy with skill, an enemy that doesn't care about collateral damage, an enemy that doesn't even care about their own lives. And it was an extremely tough fight, a daily fight. But alongside our coalition partners, we all took that fight to this vicious enemy. And over time, we were able to make progress. And eventually, as my task unit got ready to come home, we started to notice a little less violence in the city. It wasn't gone, but we started to notice a little less violence in the city. But when we got home, the SEALs that took our place, they started sending us reports that enemy attacks had gone down from 30 to 50 a day, which is what it was like when we were there. They went down to 10 a day, and then 5 a day, and then 1 a day, and then 1 a week. And we couldn't believe what we were hearing. We couldn't believe it when we heard it. But when we saw pictures that they sent back to us, that's when we started to believe. I got some of those pictures up here. You know, the previous pictures of vehicles blown up and burning in the streets, buildings rubbled out, that's what Ramadi was like for us. So when the SEALs that relieved us sent us these pictures, picture on the top left there, it's a picture of a U.S. Marine and an Iraqi policeman, and they're out there in the streets playing soccer with kids. When we were there, the kids would never even come in the streets. It was too dangerous. Picture in the middle on the right there. The center picture. It's a picture of a girls' school. Now, if you know anything about Al-Qaeda, they're not exactly pro-women's education. In fact, they don't even think that women should know how to read. But the local populace, the civilians inside Ramadi, they didn't think that. They didn't think that at all. They wanted their daughters to be educated. They wanted their daughters to have more opportunity. Yeah. And so coalition forces helped the local populace of Ramadi build a girls' school right in the downtown part of the city. And then finally, this picture on the bottom there, and I apologize if in your back it might be a little hard to make out, but if you squint your eyes, you can tell it kind of looks like a road race. Well, it's a road race. It's a road race that the citizens of Ramadi organized and ran right down the main avenue of Ramadi, and they did that without a single act of violence. And when I saw that picture, that's when I knew. That's when I knew that despite all the naysayers, despite all the negativity, despite everyone that said victory could not be achieved, when I saw these pictures, I knew that victory had absolutely been achieved in the city of Ramadi. And with every victory, there's a cost. There's a price to be paid. And the price that was paid for victory in the Battle of Ramadi was absolutely immense. While we were there with the Army and the Marine Corps, the Army lost 9 of those Abrams main battle tanks. They lost 15 Bradley fighting vehicles, which is like a smaller tank. They lost 34 Humvees just while we were there with them. They had almost 500 wounded. And just while we were there with them, they had 61 who were killed in action. And of those 61 who were killed in action, from our task unit Bruiser, we lost Mark Lee, who was the first SEAL killed in Iraq. We lost Mikey Mansour, who was the second SEAL killed in Iraq, who was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor after he jumped on a grenade to save 3 of our other teammates. And finally, Ryan Joe, who was shot in the face, was gravely wounded, but who made it out of Iraq, made it back to America. He was rendered blind by the damage that was done from the impact of the bullet. He was medically retired from the Navy, and who, after his 22nd surgery to repair the damage that had been done to his face and to his head, there were complications. And we lost Ryan as well. So what do you bring home from a deployment like that? Well, one thing that you bring home from a deployment like that is you bring home a burden, especially from a leadership perspective. Because as you're flying home to San Diego, and you know you're going to see your friends, and you know you're going to see your family, and you know you're just going to go ahead and carry on with your life, but you also know that you didn't bring home all your men. And that's something you're gonna have to live with. And that's something that's never gonna go away. But you also have to bring home something positive. You have to bring home something good. And for me, the best thing that we brought home from the Battle of Ramadi was the lessons that we learned about humility, about ownership, about teamwork, and about leadership. And when I talk about leadership, I'm not just talking about me because I was in charge of the task unit. I'm talking about every level of leadership, right down to the frontline SEAL that's not even in charge of any other people, but takes ownership of his part of the mission and executes. And we learned without a shred of doubt that leadership is the most important thing on the battlefield. And when I came home from this deployment, I took over the training for the West Coast SEAL teams, not the training where you carry telephone poles around. I took over the tactical training, where SEALs learn to shoot, move, and communicate, and where SEALs learn to lead. And the very first training mission that I went on with a SEAL platoon to observe them and see how well they would do, the very first one I went on was a complete disaster. Complete failure, the platoon's falling apart, no one knows what's happening, no one's given any direction. It's a total disaster. And as I'm watching this platoon fall apart, I realized that the reason the platoon was falling apart was because the leaders did not know how to lead. And I also realized that I'm the one that needs to teach them how to lead. That's my responsibility. And I went back to my barracks room that night, and I knew that I needed to take all the lessons I'd learned throughout my career, all the lessons that we had solidified during the Battle of Ramadi, and I needed to distill them down into something that these young SEALs could easily understand and then implement into their platoons. And so I ended up writing down what we now call the laws of combat. Cover and move, simple, prioritize and execute decentralized command. Laws of combat leadership. So the first one is cover and move. And what cover and move is a gunfighting tactic. That's what it is. It's a gunfighting tactic. You get into a machine gun fight, this is how you win. It's pretty straightforward. So let's say Sean and I are going to go out on a mission, and Sean and I are out on the battlefield, and there's some bad guys over across the street in the building, and we want to take out those bad guys and take down that building. Here's what we're going to do. First thing is I'm going to start shooting at those bad guys. Now, who knows what the bad guys are doing when I'm shooting at them? Who knows?
Cover.
Yeah, they're getting their heads down because they don't want to die. So as I'm shooting at the bad guys are scared and they're hiding. And what that means is while their heads are down and they're hiding, Sean gets up and moves to a better position. Once Sean is in a better position, he starts shooting at the bad guys. While he's shooting at the bad guys, keeping their heads down, I move to a better position. Once I'm in a better position, I start shooting again. While I'm shooting, Sean moves again. And that's what we do. We work together as a team until we get close enough to these bad guys to take them out and take down the building. Now, let me ask you this. What if I'm supposed to be shooting and Sean is up and moving and I decide, you know what, I'm kind of thirsty right now. I want to get a drink from my canteen. So I put down my weapon, I pull out my canteen to get a drink. Now what do the bad guys do?
Shoot Sean.
Yeah, now they stick their head up and they see Sean in his nice, beautiful suit. He's up and running. They look at him and you know what they do? They shoot him. They kill him. Why? Because they're bad guys. And I might be sitting here thinking, oh, that's too bad for Sean. Whoa, that's terrible for Sean. But guess what? It's not only terrible, Sean, it's terrible for me too, because I just lost my cover. So what we have to remember about cover and move, and this applies to anywhere, if one part of the team fails, it's not just that part of the team that fails, it is the whole team that fails. That's why we have to work together. Now you see I also have the word relationships written up there. And I know no one expects the Navy SEAL to come up and talk about relationships. But if you want to be able to build a good team, you have to build relationships. And then you have to build relationships not just with people that are on your team, but people in other teams. People that you need to support, people that you need support from. Those tanks that I told you about, that rescued my guys over and over again, they didn't work for me. They weren't even in my chain of command. And yet they would risk their lives to help my guys. Why is that? Because we built relationships. Because we did whatever we could to help them. And when you support each other, when you mutually support each other, when you work together as a team, that's when you win. And that's the first law of combat leadership, cover and move. Next up, we got simple. When I was running that advanced SEAL training, I used to get these young SEAL officers coming in. They just got done with college, and then they show up and make it through basic SEAL training, and then they show up to me, and they got big giant brains. At least they think they do, and they're big giant heads. And I'd come up with some little basic mission, and I'd say, hey, here's a training mission for tonight. Go and come up with a plan. And these young officers with their big heads would disappear for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. And they'd come back to me with their plan, and they'd look at me like they had the most brilliant plan in the world, and they'd show me their plan. It would be the most convoluted, complex plan you've ever seen in your life. And I'd say, this plan is dumb. And they'd look at me all sad. And I'd say, listen, the best plan and the most brilliant plan is the plan that is so simple and so clear that every single person on the team understands it. And then what you have to do is you have to make sure you communicate that plan in a simple, clear, concise manner. Because if the people don't understand the plan, or they don't understand how you communicate it to them, there is no possible way at all that they can execute that plan. So you have to keep things simple. That's the second law of combat leadership. Third law of combat leadership: prioritize and execute. And the reason we have this is because you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have problems on the battlefield, you're gonna have problems in business, you're gonna have problems in life, and because of Murphy's Law, guess what? These problems are all gonna hit you at the same time. That's the way it works. And that's one of the most difficult things about combat, is you're gonna get hit with multiple problems at the same time. And so in order to prepare these young SEALs to deal with that, I used to do that to them in simulated combat. And I went through great lengths to make it as realistic as I possibly could. So here's what would happen: a SEAL platoon would go into a building, declare the building, and boom, there'd be a big explosion. And guys would get hit in the face with pieces of foam. It would just be pyrotechnics, but believe me, it got the adrenaline flowing. And then as the smoke is starting to clear, they'd hear screaming. And they'd look down on the ground, and on the ground, there'd be a guy with no leg. And there'd be blood spraying everywhere. And don't worry, it's okay. It would be an amputee actor, and it would be fake blood, but trust me, it would get the real blood flowing. And then as that's going on, a door would open up, and out would walk 3 middle-aged women, innocent civilian women, and they'd start screaming at the top of their lungs in a different language. And then I'd start shooting everyone with paintball. And I would watch these young SEALs to see how they would react. And a lot of times what I'd see is they'd run to a wounded guy to try and help the wounded guy, then they'd run to civilian women and try and figure out what to do with them, then they try and figure out where all the people are, then they try to figure out where they're getting shot at from, then they go back to the wounded guy, then back to the women, then back to the gunfight, and they would try and solve all their problems at the same time. And when they would try and solve all their problems at the same time, you know how many they'd solve? None of them. So I'd say, listen, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. When you got all these different problems, you need to prioritize next. You need to figure out what your biggest problem is. Focus your efforts on that biggest problem. Once you get that problem solved, you can move on to the next biggest problem. Get the next biggest problem solved, you can move on to the next one, and so on down the line. Got it? And I'd look at these young SEAL officers and they'd say, got it. And I'd send them out on another training mission. And I'd throw those same problems out there. I'd give them a wounded guy, I'd give them civilians to deal with, I'd put them in a gunfight, have their troops in a bunch of different buildings so they didn't know where everyone was. And I would watch to see what they would make their #1 priority. And 9 times out of 10, they would make the priority the wounded guy. The wounded guy. So they're walking down the street, boom, paintball starts flying everywhere, Sean falls down to the ground and starts screaming. I look around, and I run over to help Sean. And when I run over to help Sean, who just got shot, what happens to me?
You get shot.
I'm getting shot too. Because the problem is not the wounded guy, the problem is the people with machine guns that are trying to kill us all. That's the problem. And it took me a while, I couldn't understand why these young SEALs would make this mistake over and over again. It took me a while to figure it out, but eventually I did figure it out. What was going on was they would get caught up in that chaos, caught up in that mayhem, and they would get emotional. They see their friend fall down, they hear their friend start screaming. Their emotions want to go help their friend, but their emotions are wrong. So what I had to teach these young SEALs to do, I had to teach them to detach, to take a step back, to step back from the chaos and back from the mayhem, and most important, to detach from their own emotions so that they could see logically what the biggest problem was and prioritize and execute. So that's the 3rd law of combat leadership. Detach, take a step back, and then prioritize and execute. And that brings us to the 4th law of combat leadership, and it's decentralized command. And decentralized command, I know those are some big words. Decentralized command, there's some big words, but they're actually not that complicated. Actually, it's very simple what decentralized command is. What decentralized command means is everybody leads. Everybody leads. And that's what I want. When I'm in charge of a team, I want every person on my team to be a leader. I used to tell that to these young SEALs. I'd say, hey, listen, you know that training mission I sent you on last night that was total chaos and mayhem? And they'd say, yeah. I'd say, it's going to be even worse tonight. You're not going to be able to handle it all yourself. You need to use decentralized command. You need to let your subordinate leaders lead. And they'd look at me and say, okay. And I'd send them out on the training mission, and I'd start throwing the chaos and mayhem at them, and I would watch those subordinate leaders, and sometimes I would see those subordinate leaders, they'd start to step up. And they'd start to lead, and for a moment, there would be hope in my heart that this was gonna go well. But then I'd see those subordinate leaders start to lead in opposite directions. Or they'd bang into each other. Sometimes they would even shoot each other with paintball. It'd be a total disaster, a total failure, and I'd bring them back to base, and I'd bring them into the debriefing room, and I'd bring that SEAL leader to the front of the room, and I'd say, okay, Lieutenant, that was pathetic. What happened? And that young SEAL leader would say, you know, I tried using that decentralized command stuff, but it just doesn't work. And then I'd have to detach from my emotions a little bit. Because the fact is, decentralized command works great, it's just that you're terrible at it. And then of course I realize I'm the one that's supposed to be teaching decentralized command, so I'm the one that's terrible, and I say, listen, here's what's going on. In order for decentralized command to work, you still have to lead. You still have to lead. And the way that you lead with decentralized command is by making sure that everyone on the team understands what the mission is, understands what the goal is, understands what the end state is, understands the parameters that they're allowed to work within, and most important, everyone on the team has to understand why they're doing what they're doing. They have to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Let me show you what this looks like. So let's say Sean and I, we're gonna go on another mission. I bring him back to life. And I say, okay, Sean, we're gonna go on this mission tonight, we're gonna attack this building. Once we get in the building and we get the building secured, I want you to take your team up to the rooftop to set security. Sean looks at me and says, roger that, got it. So, we go on the mission, we assault this building, we get the building secured. Sean knows what his job is, so he takes his team up to the rooftop of the building to set security. And when he gets up there, we're in Iraq, let's say. And it doesn't rain very much in Iraq, so most of the buildings have flat roofs. And the way that they do the construction over there on the flat roof, they've got like a 4-foot wall that goes around the roof. And it makes it a great place to be from a tactical perspective, because you're in an elevated position, but you got a wall there. So the enemy can't see you, and if they do see you, they can't shoot you because there's a wall. Well, Sean gets his team up to this particular rooftop, and for whatever reason, there's no wall. Which means they're exposed. It's like me being on this stage. They can see Sean, they can see Sean's team, which means they can shoot him. And Sean's team feels this, and they're looking around like, this is bad. The enemy can see us, the enemy can shoot us, and they're looking at Sean, and Sean's looking at them, and finally someone on Sean's team goes, hey Sean, why are we even up here? This is stupid. And Sean, not wanting to be the stupid one, he says, well, we're up here because Jocko told us to be up here. This is a terrible situation to be in. Not only is the team exposed, not only can the enemy see them, not only can the enemy shoot them, but the whole team thinks their entire chain of command is stupid. So how do we fix that? How do we fix that? The way that we fix that, let me rewind us back to the planning phase. And I say, okay, Sean, we're gonna assault this building tonight. Once we get the building secure, I want you to take your team up to the rooftop and set security. And Sean says, cool, got it. And then I say, the reason why I want you to do that is I want you to make sure that no enemy approaches on this road up to the north. And Sean says, cool, got it. Now the same thing happens. We assault the building, we take down the target, we get the target secure. Sean takes his team up to the rooftop to set security. He sees that there's no roof wall. He sees that his team is exposed. He assesses the situation and he says, hey guys, we're exposed up here. Everyone come with me. And he takes them down the stairs, back down to the 3rd floor, takes them into a north-facing room, opens up the window, puts his machine gunners in place, then he calls me up on the radio and says, hey Jocko, it's Sean. We were on the roof, there was no wall. We were exposed. I got my team down on the 3rd floor in a north-facing room, and we've got that road covered. And you know what I say? I say, thank you. I say thank you. Because he was able to solve the problem. And the reason he was able to solve the problem is because he understood why he was doing what he was doing. Now let me ask you this question. What if Sean goes out on a mission and he doesn't know why he's doing what he's doing? Whose fault is that?
Yours?
Whose fault? Yeah, it's definitely my fault. It's definitely my fault that I didn't explain it to him, but even more important, it's my fault because I failed as a leader to set a culture where if someone on the team doesn't know why they're doing what they're doing, they raise their hand and say, hey boss, why are we doing this? And you know what? There's some bosses that don't like that. There's some bosses that don't like that. There's some bosses that when someone raises their hand and say, hey boss, why are we doing this? You know what their answer is?
Because I said so.
Because I said so. And we end up in the same situation where the people that are actually out doing the work don't know why they're doing it, so they can't make decisions. So, when we talk about building a team, don't think of yourself as building a team of soldiers or of workers. Think of yourself as building a team of leaders. And if you do that, you can utilize decentralized command and you will be infinitely better than any micromanager that's out there trying to make every decision themselves. So those are the 4 laws of combat leadership. They're pretty straightforward, but I want to talk to you about something that's oftentimes it's harder for people to grasp this. It's something we call the dichotomy of leadership. And what the dichotomy of leadership is, this is opposing forces that are pulling you as a leader in opposite directions. And actually both directions that you're getting pulled in are correct. They're both right, and I know that doesn't make any sense. Let me explain it to you. So I just talked about decentralized command, let your subordinate leaders lead. The first book I wrote about leadership was called Extreme Ownership. I want you to own everything. So which one is it, Jocko? You want me to own everything, or you want me to let my subordinate leaders lead? And the answer is, and it's the same answer for all of these dichotomies, the answer is you have to be balanced. You have to be balanced. Let me give you a more simple example. Communication. Everyone agrees that a leader needs to communicate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Is it possible for a leader to communicate too much?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I can see I got some people over here that have gotten 47 emails before 5 o'clock in the morning from their leader. Now you don't know which one's important. You don't even have time to read them all. You don't have time to do your job. So it's possible for a leader to communicate too much. Is it possible for a leader to communicate too little? Oh yes it is. And now the team doesn't know what's going on. We don't know what direction we're going in. So where do we want to be? We want to be balanced. We want to be balanced. And you've got to know what type of person you are. Are you the type of person that over-communicates or under-communicates? And you need to stay balanced. Same thing with planning. I work with some companies, and they plan to have a planning meeting about coming up with a plan. It's ridiculous. And by the time it comes to execute, time has passed or the market's changed, if they even execute at all. The other side, I got some people out there, they just think they can wing it and figure it out on the way. That doesn't work either. So you don't want to plan too much, but you don't want to plan too little. What do you want to do? You want to be balanced. And you've got to know what type of person you are. I know people that hide behind planning. I'm not ready yet. Or you're the person that's just running into the first client possibility you have without any idea of how you're going to approach it. So figure out who you are and then make sure you're leaning in the right direction. And I could go on about these dichotomies forever. There's an infinite number of them. One more I do want to talk about is discipline and freedom. Discipline on the one hand is a rich and structured way of doing things. On the other side is freedom, which is we do whatever we want. And what does everybody want out of discipline and freedom? What does everybody want? Of course, everybody wants freedom. But what's interesting about this dichotomy is the way to get to freedom is through discipline. If you want freedom, you need discipline. Classic example, financial discipline. Okay, financial discipline. That's something that very few people have, but everybody wants financial freedom. Everybody wants financial freedom. Everybody wants that. But how do you get financial freedom? You gotta have that financial discipline. You gotta have the discipline to work hard. You gotta have the discipline to save your money. You gotta have the discipline to invest your money in property. You gotta have the discipline not to buy stupid things that you don't even need. And if you can have that kind of financial discipline in your life, you'll get financial freedom. Same thing with free time. Everybody wants more free time. Well, how do you get more free time? You get more free time by having more disciplined time management, by making a schedule, by sticking to the schedule, by getting up early, by not wasting your time on stupid things that provide you no benefit whatsoever. Like clicking on the next YouTube video of a cat after you already watched 13 of them. No, you need to impose discipline on your mouse clicking finger or your scrolling finger. And if you can have more disciplined time management, guaranteed you'll end up with more free time. And this doesn't only apply to us as individuals, it applies to our teams as well. And if you saw my SEAL platoon or you saw my SEAL task unit, you'd see that we had a disciplined standard operating procedure for just about everything that we did. For the way we lined up our vehicles, the way we loaded our vehicles, the way we dismounted our vehicles, the way we approached the target, the way we entered a target building, just about everything that we did, we had a disciplined standard operating procedure for. And you might think that that would constrain us out on the battlefield. But actually, the opposite is true. Because we had disciplined standard operating procedures, I could just say, hey Sean, there's a building over there we had planned to take down, go hit that building. And Sean would say, cool, got it. And he didn't need to tell me who he was gonna take with him or what kind of weapons they were gonna use. He didn't need to tell me that because we already knew. And his team already knew. So if you, with your team, if you set up disciplined standard operating procedures, it will actually give you more freedom. Now, can you go overboard with this? Yes. And I work with some companies where they put so much structure in place, so many processes in place that no one can move anymore, and when they can't move, they stop thinking. So what we want to do is even this. We need to balance our discipline and our freedom. But I can tell you this, most people, they're way over here in the freedom box. And what most people need to do is tighten up their discipline. Here's another thing I used to have to train the young SEALs on. And this surprises people sometimes. I actually had to train the young SEALs to be aggressive. I'd get a young SEAL, there'd be a building with a bunch of paintball flying around in it, and I'd see the young officer walking toward the building with his platoon, and as he got close to the building, he'd slow down, and then he'd stop and start backing away. And I'd go up and put my hand into his back, and I'd start to move him forward. And I'd say, you see that problem in that building over there? It's not gonna go away. You gotta go fix it. You gotta get aggressive. That's gotta be your default mode, is to go out and make things happen. That business deal that you want, it's not gonna knock on your door tomorrow. You have to go and get it. You have to make things happen. Now, this doesn't apply to interacting with other people. I'm not talking about you start yelling and screaming. When I talk about being default aggressive, I'm talking about being default aggressive towards taking action and making things happen and achieving your goals. You have to be aggressive. Here's something else that I get asked a lot about. What's the most important characteristic for a leader to have? And for me, it's very easy to answer this question. The most important characteristic for a leader to have is humility. And the reason I know this is because when we would fire a SEAL leader from a leadership position, we wouldn't fire that SEAL leader because he didn't know how to shoot his gun or he didn't know how to read a map. We would fire that SEAL leader because he lacked humility. Because think about what it does to your mindset when you lack humility. When you lack humility, you don't think anyone can do this any better than you. You don't listen to anyone else. You don't learn anything else. You're stuck. And if you're not moving in this world, you're actually going backwards. The other thing that happens when we let our ego get out of control or we don't stay humble is we don't respect our competitors. We don't respect the enemy. And when you don't respect your competitor, you don't plan, you don't prepare. And when you don't plan, you don't prepare, that's when you get beat. So you have to stay humble. And that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about before we get to some questions with Sean. And that is this idea right here. The first book I wrote about leadership, this idea of extreme ownership. And what this means is, you're not going to blame anyone or anything else when something goes wrong. You're going to take ownership. And when we work with winning teams and winning leaders, this is the attitude that they have. And when we work with losing teams and losing leaders, this is the attitude that they lack. And where I saw this so clearly was when I was running that advanced SEAL training. And what made it so clear is I got to see the contrast between a good SEAL leader and a bad SEAL leader. Sometimes I'd have a good SEAL leader coming through my training, sometimes I'd have a bad SEAL leader coming through my training. And this is what it would look like. I'd have a bad SEAL leader coming through my training. And I'd take him and his platoon, and I'd send them out on a training mission, and throw some problems out of it, it'd be a disaster, and it'd be fall apart, and it'd fail the mission, and I'd bring them back to base, and I'd bring the SEAL platoon into the debriefing area, and I'd bring that leader to the front of the room, and I'd say, okay, Lieutenant, that was pathetic. What happened? That bad SEAL leader would stand up and say, I'll tell you what happened. Okay? First of all, assault team leader here, you didn't bring enough people for that target. You didn't know how big that target was. You didn't do a good target study, so you didn't have enough people, and it took you forever to clear that building. That's pathetic. And then mobility commander here, you're in charge of the Humvees, and you didn't even know where to come pick us up. That's the only piece of information that you needed, and you didn't have it. That's embarrassing. And finally, sniper team leader here, you never told me where you and your team was, and that caused all kinds of confusion out there. So if we're gonna do any better, you better figure out how to do your job, you better get a grip on reality, and you better square yourself away. I'd be sitting there listening to that debrief. Anyone notice anything peculiar about that debrief? None of it was my fault. None of it was my fault. And let me ask you a question. When I point my finger at you, or I point my finger at you, or I point my finger at anyone in this audience, and I start to blame you for what went wrong, what's your natural reaction gonna be? What is it? Defensive. Gonna get defensive. And you know what people do when they get defensive? They start to point the finger too. And so what you end up with is a team where everyone is pointing their fingers at each other and blaming each other, and no one is taking ownership of the problems, and therefore the problems don't get solved. And this team is never going to improve. And they're certainly not going to become exceptional. Now, you compare that to a good SEAL leader. I'd have a good SEAL leader coming through my pipeline of training. And I'd send him and his platoon out on a training mission, and it would be just as hard, if not harder. And they'd fail miserably, and there'd be confusion and chaos, and I'd bring them back to base. And I'd bring them into the debriefing room, and I'd bring that lieutenant up in the front of the room, and I'd say, okay, that was pathetic, what happened? And the good SEAL leader would stand up and say, okay, let me tell you what I saw from my perspective. First of all, assault team leader, I didn't give you the people that you needed for that target. I should have sat down with you and made sure you realized how big that target was, and made sure I gave you enough people for that target. Next time, as soon as we get the tasking, I'm gonna sit, we're gonna make sure we understand the target together. And then mobility commander here in charge of the Humvees, you came to my brief that I'm responsible for, and I failed as a leader to convey to you the one piece of information that you needed, and that was where to come pick us up. Next time, when we get done with the brief, I'm gonna spend 30 seconds with you. We're gonna look at a map, and we're gonna make sure you know exactly where to pick us up. And the sniper team leader here, I lost track of you and your team. That's my most important job as a combat leader, is to know where all my people are on the battlefield. And I lost track of your team. Next mission, I'm gonna set some checkpoints along the way so that I know where you and your team are the whole time. Those are the changes I'm gonna make so that we can do a better job next time.
Let's go!
Now, you might think that the team now points a finger back at me and they say, you're darn right, Jocko, this is all your fault. But you know what they actually do? Actually, the assault team leader says, hey boss, you got a lot on your plate. I rounded down the number of people I thought I was gonna need. I will never make that mistake again. You don't have to babysit me. And then the mobility commander in charge of the Humvees says, boss, there's only one piece of information I needed and I didn't have it. How did I not have it? No one on my team had it. That is not on you, that is on me, and I guarantee it will never happen again. You don't have to hold my hand. And then the sniper team leader says, hey boss, the reason you didn't know where I was is because I didn't know where I was. I got lost. Next time, I'm gonna bring an extra GPS and an extra map, and I guarantee you will know where I am the whole time. You don't have to worry about me. And you can see, what we have now is we have a team where every person on the team is taking ownership of the problems, and therefore the problems get solved. And this team is going to improve every time they do an operation. And this is the kind of team that will become exceptional. Now, you can see I have "It's About You" written up there. And the reason I have that written up there, and the reason I want to call it out, is because I know that some of you are sitting out there right now, and you're like, yeah, that's right. Extreme ownership. I really hope my team is paying attention. Because if my team would just take ownership, we'd be good to go. Or there's some of you that are sitting there looking at that going, yeah, that's right, Jocko, extreme ownership, and I really hope my boss is paying attention. Because if my boss would just take ownership, we'd be good to go. Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm not talking about your team, and I'm not talking about your boss, I'm talking about you. And I'm not just talking about your business, I'm talking about your life too. And if you start to take ownership of what is going on in your world, other people will start to take ownership as well, and this will spread, and you and your team will become unstoppable. And with that, we're gonna get Sean up here, and we're gonna burn through some questions.
Jocko, a hand, please. That was amazing. Give him a real hand. But for real. Unbelievable. First of all, if I am getting shot at by bad guys, I sure as hell want you there. So I'm totally down with that. I can take instruction. All right, so thank you for that. It was amazing. Everybody's blowing me up and telling me how great it is. I'm like, I can hear it in the back too, dude. I know how great it is as well. I'd like to get right to it. So what we got here, Jocko, men and women that are meeting with middle American clients, these people have said to us, hey, come help me. We ain't cold knocking, cold calling, we're not doing that. And you provide a lot of perspective. How can all of us provide ourselves and the people that we're supposed to be leading and supporting better perspective? Because sometimes people say to me, man, I'm afraid to dial the phone. Like, I know they filled it out, I know they sent it to me, but I'm just straight up, Sean, afraid to do it. Can you help enlighten us on that?
I think one of the most important things, remember earlier I was talking about everyone has to know why they're doing what they're doing? Right? You gotta know why you're doing what you're doing. So when you're looking at that phone, on the other end of that phone is someone that actually needs your help. Is someone that doesn't have their future secured the way they should. Is someone that doesn't have their finances organized the way they should. So why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You're doing this so you can help people in those situations. So for me, whenever I need to do something, especially if it's something that maybe I don't feel like doing at the time, hey, don't want to work out today. Okay, why do I need to do this? Because that's how you stay healthy. Sometimes you got to make a tough decision. Why am I making this tough decision? What is behind it? So when you're looking at that phone or you're going to knock on a door, you got to say to yourself, what am I trying to do here? Why am I trying to do this? Because I'm going to help somebody secure their future. So I would keep that in mind as you approach the hallway and the cathedral of rejection, which I know is a tough business.
Amen. Great answer. Are you, and I don't know the answer to this, Matt. Daily? Are you posting daily? Like when you throw a watch up there to see what time? Is that a daily deal?
It is.
Okay, so y'all follow Jocko. Everybody should follow Jocko on Instagram, everywhere. But I woke up one day, feeling pretty good about myself, about 5 a.m. And there's this watch that says 3:50. And I said, I bet he doesn't do it the next day, and the next day. And then, when did that start? And tell us, please, sir, why did you start doing that?
So when did it start? It started when I was first got to SEAL Team 1. And when I first got to SEAL Team 1, I already learned this in basic SEAL training. You know what I learned in basic SEAL training? I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the smartest, I wasn't gonna pick things up easily. I was gonna have to do more work to keep up. And you show up at work with everybody else, there's no extra time. So what I had to do is I had to start showing up early. I had to show up early to get my workout in, to check my gear, to study the radios. I had to get there early. And I got in that habit. And eventually, if you're working a couple more hours than everybody else, you're gonna catch up to them. And if you keep going, you can actually perform better than you're capable. So I got in that habit, a required habit of getting up and doing more work. Then when I got out into the civilian sector, well, guess what? I spent 20 years in the military. I don't know anything about the business world. I don't know anything about it. I spent my entire life institutionalized in the military. How am I gonna get ahead in the civilian sector? Tell you what, I might not be that smart, but I'm a hard worker, and I'll be up early grinding. Yeah, and then at some point, a guy named Tim Ferriss, I went on his podcast and he said, do you know what Twitter is and social media? I said, I know what it is, but I don't do social media. And he said, well, if you want to communicate with a lot of people, you got to get on social media. And I kind of shrugged my shoulders. And when a guy like that, who is very experienced in that world, tells you to do it, you got to be humble. I said, roger that, Tim. I signed up for Twitter, and he put out a podcast with us on it. And I woke up in the morning, I said, what am I going to put on this thing? And it was like 4:30 in the morning. I said, well, I'll take a picture of this, because we had talked about it. So I took a picture of my watch, and a bunch of people said, oh, that's cool, and they put pictures of their watch. And here you go, 7 years later, there's a bunch of pictures of my watch.
That's amazing. Last question before we wrap up with this, sir. So, a lot of the people we work with, myself included, I wasn't raised by some businessman or businesswoman. My mom was by herself, just trying to make ends meet. Like a lot of the folks here don't come from any lineage of great businessmen and women. And when a lot of the people that work with us start, they get rolling, and then a lot of people that they know share their same kind of lack of experience, and the world starts telling them it's stupid. If anybody could do it, like everybody could, they would do it. There's no way it's even real. It's straight up just complete bullshit. There's no way you can do that. And they pour all this negativity into it. If all these men and women were under your leadership, I'm like saying command, I'm about ready excited to do something right now. It's about listening to you, I get excited. What would be your advice to them? Because that's what a lot of them ask me, like, I'm trying to get out of my own way. And these things keep doing this. I heard this one day, somebody said, I'd like to create an adventure where people could see themselves the way I see them and believe in them much. What can you give all of us here if you were leading all of us into us building a business and us being attacked from other folks that are trying to speak negatively to these amazing men and women?
Yeah, you heard me talk about basic SEAL training, and there's an 80% attrition rate. 80% of people quit. And every single one, 100% of them that go there think they're gonna make it. 100%. And 80% of them quit. College athletes, Ivy League people, people from good backgrounds, people from bad backgrounds, and everything in between. What happens is, you gotta look at what can I do right now? What can I do right now? I'm not thinking about a year down the road, I'm thinking about what am I gonna do today? And this is something I said the other day. Imagine if tonight, before you went to bed, you wrote down what you needed to do tomorrow. And then imagine that you woke up and you actually did it. And then imagine that you did that for a week. All those phone calls that you didn't want to make, all the doors that you didn't want to knock on, but you knew you were supposed to. Imagine if you actually did it. Imagine if you ate healthy like you know you're supposed to. Imagine if you worked out like you know you should. Imagine if you did that for a week, how you'd feel. Now imagine if you did it for a month. Are there going to be setbacks? Oh yeah. Now imagine if you did it for a year, 2 years, and then you get the machine that you're talking about where you get to see what you are capable of. So you all know what you're supposed to do. The difference between the people that say, oh, it's not true, and the people that make it happen is they do what they're supposed to do. That's what it is.
I want to tell you, first of all, it's been an honor, and I mean that. We have a lot of people who speak to us. I ain't gonna lie to you. Some of them knock it out the park. Some of them, they bunt. Some swing and miss. You knock this thing out of the park, and you are, I mean this. No, I mean this. And you're what, man, you and all the people that do what you do, you make this country the greatest place. I love you, and here's what I love the best. I was backstage. I said, we'll do a little Q&A. I said, all right. And she said, then I'll wrap it up. He looked at me like this, I'll wrap it up. And I said, you want me on or off the stage? He didn't say much, looked at me and said, you might as well just go ahead and get off the stage, I'll handle it. I love that, bro. You got it, man. I'm gonna get out your way. Hey, sir, thank you so much. It's been an honor for you, so thank you.
So I'm gonna wrap this up real quick by talking about the last mission that we did in the Battle of Ramadi. We were like 24, maybe 48 hours from going home. We had all of our gear on big aircraft pallets ready to get loaded up on the aircraft and sent home. And I'm sitting in my tactical operations center doing some administrative stuff, and I get a knock on the door. And it's platoon commander. Platoon commander says, hey Jocko, hey boss, this bad guy we've been looking for the last 6 months, we know where he's gonna be tonight. We got some intel, and we wanna go get him. I said, hey, sounds good. Everyone had one bag left over with their weapon and their radio and their gear in it just in case. I said, you go get with your platoon, start coming up with a plan, I'll start running it up the chain of command, getting the authorization. So that's what I did. I started running up the chain of command, getting authorization. He went with his platoon and started the planning. A couple hours go by, And I get another knock on the door. I say, come in. Guy walks in, he closes the door behind him, so I know he's got something serious to talk to me about. And this guy's another SEAL. He's a guy I was friends with, a guy I had respect for. And he said, hey boss, I've been out there talking to some of the guys in the platoon, and we're thinking that maybe we don't need to do this mission. He said, we've been here for over 6 months, we've conducted hundreds of operations, we've had a huge impact on the battlefield, but we've also taken significant casualties. And we lost Mark, and we just lost Mikey, and we don't know what's gonna happen to Ryan, but we know it's not good, and we're thinking that maybe we should just go home. And I had to think about that, because that was a legitimate point. And if we went out on that operation and we hit a big roadside bomb or got into a big gunfight, we could lose 2 more guys, or 4 more guys, or 6 more guys that night. And as I thought about that, I looked up at him and I said, let me ask you this question. If we don't do this operation, who's gonna do it? Who's gonna do it? We're gonna turn it over to the next SEALs that show up here that don't know the terrain like we know it, they're not acclimated to the weather like we are, or are we gonna let them take the risk? Or are we gonna turn it over to the Army or the Marine Corps? They don't have the training that we have, they don't have the gear that we have. Are we gonna make them take the risk? Or, since we've been looking for this bad guy for 6 months and we only know where he's gonna be for 1 night, are we just gonna let him continue to go out there and kill innocent Iraqi civilians and let this guy continue to go out there and kill Americans? If we don't do this operation, who's gonna do it? And he didn't even answer the question, because he knew the answer and I knew the answer. If we didn't do that operation, no one was going to do it. And so the guys went out that night, they caught that bad guy, brought him back to base, and the next day, we headed home. But that conversation stuck with me, especially from a leadership perspective. And remember, everyone in this room is a leader. But from that perspective, if we don't build relationships so we can cover and move for each other, who's gonna do it? If we don't simplify things so that everyone understands the mission, who's gonna do it? If we don't figure out what the priorities are so we can execute on the right things, who's gonna do it? If we don't set up a culture of decentralized command where everyone on the team understands why they're doing what they're doing, who's gonna do it? And if we don't step up and take ownership and solve problems, who is going to do it? And you know the answer. It's your life. If you don't step up, no one is going to do it. So I say, take ownership. Take extreme ownership. Take ownership of your mission. Take ownership of your job. Take ownership of your team. Take ownership of your clients. Take ownership of your future. And take ownership of your life. And then lead. Lead. That's the most powerful thing we can do as human beings, is lead. Lead yourself, lead your family, lead your team, lead your community to victory. And that's all I got, everybody. Thank you for having me.